Hey friends, it's executive producer Johna. Are you surprised to hear my voice right now on an interview? I got the amazing opportunity from our friends over at Geek Vibes Nation to talk with director Sophie Barthes about her brand new movie, The Pod Generation. Okay, everyone, I am here with Sophie Barthes, the director of The Pod Generation. Sophie, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
How excited are you that the movie's out now?
Today is the
Yes.
release. Very
Oh,
excited.
I bet it's so exciting. It's such a unique movie. What made you want to tell the story of Alvy and Rachel?
I've always been obsessed with science fiction, and I think when I was a teenager, I read Brave New World, and this was always in the back of my mind. And also, I had very strange dreams when I was expecting my daughter, but this was like 13 years ago. So I always wanted to do something about artificial wombs and making into a personal journey for a woman that would decide to go for this technology. So when you create a script, because it takes so long to write it, it's never one specific moment. It's just like layers of inspiration from different things. And I don't know, it all came together eventually.
Yeah, as a person who's a writer, I totally understand. Got to get all
Yeah.
those layers in there and the
Yes.
character development.
Inspiration is a strange thing. You don't know how it comes in waves and then you forget about it and then it comes back and nags you. Because I had this thing for a long time and then I put it aside. I came back to it many years after. It's a very strange process, like a birth, maybe.
Yeah, I totally get that. So, what I noticed while I was watching the movie was that it seemed to be a switching of the roles with Alvy and Rachel because he was the one who was at home with the pod and he was the one who was bonding more with it because it's in the womb technically. And she was working, so she didn't get a chance to really bond with it, which is complete reverse of how it normally is when a woman is physically pregnant because they have the baby inside them at all times. So they're spending the most time with it. And the men usually have a problem bonding when the baby's in there and when they come out. So what made you want to show that shift as well?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I wanted to explore what happens when you change the roles. It's playing around with these ideas of attachment theory. When I was pregnant, I was reading all those books about parenting, attachment parenting, the good enough mother. And you can drive yourself crazy with the amount of writing there is around motherhood and parenthood. And but I thought it would be really interesting to explore the role reversal because yeah, you're right. In a sense, he's spending more time with the pod, so it makes sense that he will get attached to it. And also because I think as a character, he's connected to nature, so he's more connected to his own nature, and he's actually able to see a baby inside the pod, while Rachel is a bit more disconnected and ambivalent, which happens to a lot of women actually. And it doesn't click for her because she's at work and she doesn't spend any time with the pod. So she doesn't feel the maternal instinct kicking. And the more she's blaming herself for not feeling it, the less she's going to feel it. So I was, interested to play about all these theories because it's so hard when you're a young parent and you feel you never the good enough mother. And there's a beautiful writing from Winnicott, who is a British psychologist, and he said it's okay to just be the good enough parents and the good enough mother. You don't have to put so much pressure on yourself because the love is there, but then society is pushing us to always be perfect. And I think that's what happens to Rachel. She wants to be perfect at her job. She wants to be perfect as a mother. And that's the recipe for disaster because there is no perfection. We're just human beings. So I think Alvi is able to negotiate this better because he's more centered in a way. And also maybe because it's easier for a man because it's an external thing. So I just wanted to play around and see what happens if you invert the roles.
Oh, I loved it. I noticed it immediately. It's like there's
Yeah.
a gender change here.
Yeah.
Okay, I
But I
see
did the things, all the things he does in the montage when he's pregnant, like
it.
on in the fridge. And because they say like when you're pregnant, a lot of neurons move, they physically move from the brain to we know that now we have neurons from the brain that move down to the uterus. Maybe it's to transmit immune system information, or there's a sort of transmission that happens. And so I remember doing these crazy things when I was pregnant, forgetting the phone in the fridge, or like always forgetting, being super absent-minded. And so I wanted to like have fun with this.
Oh yeah, I laughed every time. How many times was it unscripted that they were gonna almost drop the pod?
Yeah, some was unscripted. They had fun playing around. I think for actors, it's great. Like you just give them an object and they have to react to this object. And for me, the egg is more like an allegory of our relationship to technology. It could be, it happens to be a child, so it makes it more precious and more and crazier and completely absurd. But it could be, it's just a metaphor of like how insanely dependent we've become of technology. And if you push it further every time, like we could end up, I'm sure this technology is going to exist, but I'm not that interested in the technology itself, that it's a child. Like I'm more interested in what is humanity creating and why do we keep innovating so much without thinking about the consequences on our daily life and what it's doing to us as human beings.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I also noticed that they have like oxygen bars where they're just like getting oxygen from like the plants and stuff. Like they're encased. And I was like,
yeah,
that's a very interesting take, because normally it gave me like a Lorax kind of feel, you know.
yeah.
Alvy gave me like, I am the Lorax, you know, because he's the botanist. So he's, no, we need trees. And everyone's like, why do we
I'm
need
sure
trees?
they will, if they could, they would commodify and sell oxygen. I'm sure oxygen bars are going to exist. Yeah, I think it was based a little bit on my sense of how absurd it is sometimes in New York, because I've been living in New York for 20 years, even if my accent is still very French. The soul cycling. So you have this beautiful park, you have Central Park, you have Prospect Park, and people are going these soul cycling little boxes and cycle inside. I always feel it's so strange. It's like, why don't you just go to the park? Oh, okay, it's cold in winter in New York, that's granted. But I felt when we had the toxic cloud from all the fires in Canada, I was like, oh, maybe this oxygen bar would be something they would start to develop when the air becomes so polluted. And I wrote this script before the pandemic, actually, and it was strange because the first draft everyone had masks, but it was for pollution. And then the pandemic happened and the movie was made after the pandemic, as no one wants to see a movie now with all the masks. So I removed that element from the script. But it's funny, when you do science fiction, you can just, by coincidence, you just predict things that you had no idea were going to happen.
That's that's pretty funny. You're like, yeah, you guys are gonna wear masks, and then it's
Yeah.
actually, don't do that.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, the producer were like, I think we should remove the mask element. Not funny at all.
Oh yeah, I bet that was probably something else. They're like, nope, sorry, can't do that. Rachel has a lot of dreams in the movie, and her therapist is like, dreams aren't significant. And as a person who dreams a lot, they're pretty significant to me. So what do you think, as the director, what did you imagine for those dreams for Rachel? What is their significance to her?
I think I'm very Carl Jung, but he was a Austrian psychoanalyst who split with Freud, actually, and he paid a lot of importance to dreams. And when you read about dreams, I have a dream journal, and I think dreams are the dialogue you're having with your subconscious and your soul. And if you pay attention to your dreams, they pay attention to you. And then the more you write them, they're like little movies, the more you remember them. And I think one feature of modern life is we don't really pay attention to them. They're like, oh, dreams are boring. Like whenever you tell a dream to a friend, I don't know if you notice their gaze start to glaze and they're like, oh my God, I'm going to listen to that dream. But I think they do pay so much importance because they're a poetic language that your soul or your subconscious, whatever you want to call it, is trying to share with you. And when you're pregnant, actually, you have insane dreams. And I think it's the hormonal makeup that changes. Something happens because you're about to do something very important for humanity, for yourself, start a family, put a life on this planet. And so you have crazy dreams. And most of the dreams, I had so many of those dreams that were like patterns and repetitive, about giving birth to this boiled egg or giving birth to a strange animal. Or so it's hard to understand them, but I think they're very poetic. And for me, it meant that Rachel was very ambivalent. Like part of her was like, I'm in control. This is completely under my conscious control. But in reality, inside of her, it's a total mess. She's not in control. She's dreaming that she's buying. I had this dream actually that I was buying a baby at the supermarket and there were all those babies for sale. And when I was about to pay for my baby, they told me there's a 2-for-1 promotion. Do you want a second baby? I was like, no, I am fine. I just want one baby. But it's like, why do you dream those things there? So you could analyze it in so many different ways, but I thought it would be funny to see inside of her what's really happening, because in reality, she's very conflicted and ambivalent about this artificial birth. And it would have been more simple if she couldn't have children, then there would be no choice and she would have done that technology. But I think it was important that she could have a child the natural way, if you want.
Mhm.
And she doesn't do it because she gets pressure from work and from society, and it's the cool thing to do. Everyone wants to do it. It's almost a fetish. So it's very Orwellian in a sense. The movie is a satire, but it's actually pretty scary and nightmarish that society is dictating how you're going to reproduce and when is a good time to have a child. And that's what I wanted to say about technology, that it can be insidious in a way, and it's making you make choices that sometimes disconnect you from yourself. And it's from the apps to all the stuff that seemed great in terms of convenience, but every time you do it, how much of yourself you lose in the process. And that for me is the biggest question in the film that I'm not going to resolve because I'm not a politician, or and as a filmmaker, I'll ask to ask questions. And some people were complaining that the movie doesn't give any answers, but you're not there as a filmmaker to give the answers, because that would be very omnipotent. Like, I don't have the answers of existence. I just have issues that I'm dealing with as a human being. And then, so that's why I wanted to explore these themes around her character. And I put a lot of my personal experience when I was pregnant, and just wanted to stay playful with it. The movie doesn't take itself too seriously. It's a comedy, it's a satire. But yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
You did. That's okay. I think it does get a little bit of resolve towards the end, because Rachel, she decides like, no, we're gonna have this baby. I love Alvy stealing, egg napping the pod. And they're like, no.
There are answers from things that I believe profoundly. I believe that the only thing that really matters at the end is your connection to nature. And we, because of a modern existence, every day we're disconnecting ourselves more and more from nature. And I think for the generations now that spend so much time on screens, it's going to be very hard for them to protect nature if they don't spend time in nature, because it's hard to love something if you don't have an experience with it. So this I profoundly believe. These are themes that I've put in the film that some people can read, other people won't read them and think it's superficial. But for me, these are profound themes that I feel like, living in New York, you do feel a disconnection from nature, and you feel like cities now are trying to do this weird thing that's called biophilia. So they're inviting nature in the cities with those, you've seen probably in coffee shops. I don't know if you live in New York or in LA, or acrylic wall with nature is everywhere in the city. Lacra, it's like an illusion that we love nature and we modified, and it's not nature, the experience of really being in nature and letting go of all the artificial technology and just being there and feeling the in your senses, the nature and the communion with nature. So this for me, that's why I wanted the ending to be like this, and I'm not going to spoil it, but it's very important philosophically for me what it says. And then some people will read it, other people will not get it, but that's not I can't do anything about that.
Yeah, you can't predict how people are going to see the movie. Yeah. And then my final, most important question to me, how do you think Carl the cat will react to the new baby?
I love that you pick on the cat. I love that cat. He's a French cat, and he's a trained cat, and he's one of the best cats acting in movies. He's a sort of celebrity.
Oh my gosh.
He does everything you ask him. He's a super intelligent cat. And we're all starting to get really fond of Carl. His name is Gaspard, his real name.
I love it.
But I'm sure, I think, I don't have a pet, but I think they get a little bit jealous when the attention focuses on another human being. But then I develop a bond, probably. So I think he'll probably have those diametrically opposed reaction to a new life coming into their, because I'll be spending a lot of time with his cat, petting him. And so I'm sure he's going to have a bit of jealousy, which is an animal feeling, like human feelings.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that cat. He was very special.
He was a good cat. I was like, oh, they have a cat. And I love that towards the end, they were like, no, we have to, because sometimes in movies, they're like, oh, they have a pet. Yeah, they like just abandon their pet. And I'm like, who's watching your cat?
No, we're like, they have to take the cat. And also I love when the cat feels that there is a presence in the pod. And this I put because animals, I think this is a little philosophical thing that some people will understand and other will be like, what? It's far-fetched. But I think animals we've disconnected ourselves a lot from our instincts. And the most animal instinct, that's why, I don't know if that's still in the movie, but there is a moment that in the script, a friend of Rachel was saying, we're not mammals. We don't have to have babies, mammals like cows. We're superior to them, but we actually are mammals. And so the cat reacts to the pod and knows there's a human being in it means he's connected to his instinct. He knows where life is, and he doesn't need to intellectualize all this. It's just being an animal. And we've lost this because we think we can dominate nature and animals and control it, but we're also animals in a way. So
Yeah.
when we disconnect ourselves from that nature, that animal nature, animalistic nature, what happens to us as human beings? And I think it's creating a lot of issues, like mental issues, emotional issues. But I could talk for hours. I don't want to bother you.
I love it. Sophie, I love the movie. It's out in theaters now, The Pod Generation. So go and support my new friend, Sophie Barthes, with her movie, The Pod Generation. And thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to chat with me.
Thanks so much for the great questions and your time.
Thanks for joining us for another celebrity interview. Of course, the KJ Today Show isn't just about talking to celebs, it's about hanging out with you. Join us live on Wednesday nights for pop culture, people to know, and pets. The KJ Today Show on YouTube. Subscribe and watch live Wednesday nights at 7.